The December wind whistled through the cracked wooden boards of my ranch house, but I didn't feel the cold. My heart was too warm, too full of anticipation. I sat at my kitchen table, polishing my old leather boots, the tactical ones I'd worn for 25 years patrolling the Texas-Mexico border. These boots only came out for important occasions. On the table beside me, I'd arranged the gifts, a bottle of bourbon I'd aged myself for 5 years, a jar of homemade peach preserves, and a wool scarf I'd clumsily knitted for my daughter-in-law, Heather. Tucked in the corner was Patricia's old pocket watch, the one my late wife had carried every day of our marriage. I wanted Daniel to have it this Christmas. My name is Michael Miller. I'm 72 years old, and I'm a father. 6 months ago, my son Daniel had driven up from Houston to visit. He'd put his arm around my shoulders, eyes shining with pride, and promised me, "Dad, this Christmas you have to come to the city. I'm going to cook you the best brisket in the world. We're putting up the biggest tree in the neighborhood." That promise had kept me going through 6 lonely months on this ranch. Daniel is a man of his word, worth his weight in gold. He's never let me down, not once. My phone vibrated on the table. I picked it up, expecting a message confirming what time to catch the bus tomorrow. Instead, my blood ran cold. "Old man, stay away. I don't need you here. Go die alone on your ranch." I read it 3 times, then 5, then 10. The words felt wrong, all wrong. Daniel would never call me old man like that, so dry, so cruel. He always called me Dad or Pops, with that teasing, affectionate tone in his voice. And Daniel was meticulous about punctuation. Every text message had perfect grammar, perfect periods and commas. This message was cold, mechanical, like it was written by a stranger trying to kick out a stray dog. I called immediately. Voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. My heart started pounding, not with anger, but with fear. A fear I hadn't felt since my days on the border, when you could smell danger in the air like gunpowder before it ignites. I dialed Heather, my daughter-in-law. The phone rang for a long time. Finally she answered, "Hello, Dad? Is that you?" Her voice was trembling, breathless, like someone was holding a knife to her back. "Heather, where's Daniel?" I kept my voice calm, steady. "Why did he send me a message telling me not to come? I'm getting ready to head to the terminal." He's sleeping." "No, wait. We're at the airport. We're going to Miami. Emergency. Dad, there's a lot of noise here. Don't come, please. Daniel's very tired. He doesn't want to talk." She was lying. I knew she was lying. Behind her voice, I didn't hear airport announcements, no rolling suitcases, no intercom calling passengers to their gates. Instead, I heard music, loud, pounding gangster rap, the kind that glorifies criminals, the kind Daniel strictly forbade in his home. That heavy bass, those aggressive lyrics about guns and drugs and violence, and between the music, I could hear a man's rough laughter, wild, menacing. "Hang up. Tell that old man to get lost." The voice was harsh, slurred with alcohol. Then the line went dead. I stood frozen in the middle of my kitchen, gripping the phone until my knuckles turned white. Hot blood rushed to my head. A normal father might shrug his shoulders, might think his kids changed plans at the last minute, might pack away the gifts with disappointment and go to bed. But I'm not a normal father. I'm a man who spent 25 years working the Texas-Mexico border. I can smell danger as clearly as I can smell rain coming across the desert. I know the difference between a change of plans and a cry for help. "Going on vacation?" I muttered to myself, staring at nothing. "No, son, I know where you are. And I know you didn't go anywhere." I grabbed my old duffel bag, took out the warm clothes. Instead, I went to the drawer and pulled out my tactical folding knife, the oak-handled one that had been my companion since my days as a border cop. The blade gleamed under the yellow kitchen light. I slipped it deep into the inside pocket of my thick jacket, right next to my chest. I left my house that night, leaving behind the gifts and the false peace. I wasn't going to have Christmas dinner. I was going to find my son. Because every instinct in my body was screaming that Daniel was in mortal danger. I sat hunched in the last seat of the beat-up Greyhound bus that covered the night route to Houston. Outside the window, the night was black as ink. Torn from time to time by headlights sweeping across the dry trees at the edge of the highway. The wind howled, bringing cutting cold from the mountains. But the cold outside was nothing compared to the storm raging inside me. They say when you get old, your senses get dull, your sight blurs, your hearing fails, your hands slow down. But there's one thing that never ages, one thing that gets sharper with the years: a father's instinct. We call it a gut feeling. It's like when an old wolf smells the storm before the black clouds arrive, like when a horse trembles before the earthquake hits. Tonight, that gut feeling was screaming in my head. Daniel is in danger. Run, Michael, run. I clutched the worn duffel bag on my lap. My fingers reached in to touch the inside pocket of my jacket. The cold, rough surface of the knife handle reassured me. I'd used this knife for 40 years, from when I was a young border agent to when I became a lonely old man on the ranch. The blade was worn, but it remained sharp as a razor, sharp enough to cut rope, peel fruit, and if necessary, protect my family from predators. I remembered Daniel when he was 7 years old. There'd been a terrible storm, and our best cow got lost in the brush. I thought about leaving it till morning, but Daniel cried stubbornly, insisting we go look for her. Father and son walked in rain and wind all night. When we found the cow trapped in a ravine, Daniel jumped down, using his little hands to try and lift her. The boy was covered in mud, shivering with cold, but his eyes had this strange determination. He was just like his mother, the noblest, bravest woman I'd ever known. "Dad, I'm never going to abandon our family," Matthew had said while we led the cow back to the barn. A boy like that, a grown man now, couldn't have sent that message telling his father to drop dead like a beggar. No way. It couldn't be. "Hey, boss, why the worried face?" the bus driver called out, looking at me through the rearview mirror. He was around Daniel's age, chewing gum noisily. "Going to visit family for the holidays with that funeral look?" I forced a crooked smile. "Yeah, my son said he had a surprise. I'm just nervous to find out what it is." "Probably good news. Kids in the city make good money these days. Maybe they'll give you a car or a trip." He laughed loudly. I stayed silent, looking out the window. A trip? Sure. The message said they were going to Miami, but why the secrecy? Why was Heather's voice trembling like that? And the music, that damn music, kept haunting me. I closed my eyes, praying silently. "Lord, please protect my boy. If he's okay, I'll offer you the rest of my life in penance. But if someone dares to touch a hair on his head, forgive me for what I'm about to do." I arrived in the city just as darkness fell on December 23rd. Houston glowed with lights. Giant Christmas trees blinked in the squares. Church bells rang announcing a season of peace. But all that only made me feel more lost and alone. I took an old taxi to the suburbs where Daniel had bought his house 3 years ago. A decent 2-story home, the biggest pride of his life. He'd worked like a mule, overtime day and night at his trucking company, to afford that place. "We're here, boss. Nice area," the taxi driver said, slowing down. I looked outside. Yes, it was Daniel's neighborhood. The houses around were luxuriously decorated for Christmas. The neighbor's house on the left blazed with LED lights shaped like reindeer. The widow's house on the right had a giant inflatable Santa Claus waving mechanically. But my son's house was different. It was completely dark, no blinking lights, no wreath on the door. The cream-colored 2-story house stood imposing and cold, separated from the joy around it. The curtains on both floors were drawn tight, as if the owners wanted to hide every secret inside. But what gave me chills wasn't the darkness. It was what was parked in the yard. Daniel's front yard, where he usually parked his spotless silver sedan, was now invaded by 3 huge pickup trucks. Pitch black, dark-tinted windows, nothing visible inside. The bodywork was stained with red mud, the kind you only find on the dirt roads near the border where smugglers move their cargo. They were parked brutally, crushing the green grass that Daniel tended every weekend. And then I heard it. When I got out of the taxi and stood in front of the iron gate, music boomed from inside the house. It wasn't Silent Night, it wasn't jingle bells, it was shrill trumpets, accelerated bass, and the nasal voice of gangster rap. I crossed the border with the white packages, gun on my belt, bag full of cash. Whoever gets in my way gets lead. The lyrics, full of violence, hit my ears like slaps. Daniel hated that music. He'd told me, "Dad, that music is poison. It celebrates evil. In my house, songs that praise criminals will never be played." Yet now his own house vibrated with that filthy sound. I stood rooted in front of the gate. The cold wind hit my face, but cold sweat ran down the back of my neck. The anxiety from earlier had become absolute certainty. This was not a quick trip to Miami. This was an invasion. I moved closer, trying to look through a tiny crack between the curtains in the living room. Yellow light from inside filtered out. I squinted, my heart racing. The scene inside made my blood run cold, then boil with rage. In the living room, on Daniel's brown Italian leather sofa, the one he'd saved for months to buy, sat his in-laws, sprawled out like they owned the place. Frank Torres, with a red face, chugged Daniel's expensive whiskey bottle straight from the spout. Gloria Torres, a heavy woman with a face full of makeup, laughed out loud with a long cigarette in her hand, dropping ash on the white wool rug. But the one who caught my attention most wasn't them. It was an unknown guy sitting with his feet on the coffee table. He looked about 30, shaved head with a thick gold chain on his neck like a dog collar. He wore a tank top showing a tattoo of a black scorpion that crawled from his bicep up to his neck. He was using Daniel's fruit knife to clean his fingernails while he laughed, saying something that made the whole Torres family celebrate. I recognized him. Though I'd never seen him in person, I'd seen his photo once when Daniel had sighed and showed it to me. Tyrell Torres, they called him T-Bone, Heather's brother, the one Daniel had mentioned. That guy's a disaster, Dad. He's involved with the cartels. I forbade him from ever stepping foot in this house. So what the hell was he doing here? Why was his wife's family partying in my son's house when Daniel supposedly wasn't even there? And most importantly, where was Daniel? I took a step back, hiding in the shadow of the old oak tree in front of the gate. I needed to confirm. I needed to see Heather. I breathed deeply, trying to calm my wildly beating heart. I adjusted my shirt collar, smoothed the edge of my jacket that hid the knife, and stepped out of the shadows. I rang the doorbell. Ding dong. The bell rang clearly but seemed to be swallowed by the noise inside. I rang again, this time holding my finger down longer. Inside, the music cut off abruptly. I heard hurried steps, whispers. "Who is it? I said we don't want visitors." A man's hoarse voice resonated. "Let me see. Probably the pizza." A woman's voice. "Heather." The heavy wooden door opened slightly. Heather appeared, wearing a thin silk nightgown with a sweater poorly thrown on top. Her face was heavily made up, but she couldn't hide the gauntness, the deep dark circles under her eyes. When she saw me standing there with my duffel bag, the color drained from her face. She stood paralyzed like a statue, gripping the edge of the door. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. "Michael," she whispered so softly the wind almost carried it away. I looked straight into my daughter-in-law's eyes, searching for a little warmth, a little welcome, but there was nothing. In her eyes, there was only pure terror. "Hello, Heather," I said, my voice grave but calm. "I'm here." She didn't answer. I moved forward, trying to take a step inside, but Heather backed away quickly, blocking the way with her hand on the door. "Dad, why did you come? I already sent you a message. We're at the airport. No, wait, we canceled the flight, but Daniel's sleeping. He's very tired." "Heather." I cut her off sharply, my look cold and hard. "You say Daniel's sleeping. Then what's that music? And whose trucks are those outside? Why are your parents and your brother in the house if your husband is sick?" Heather flinched. She looked back with fear. Just at that moment, T-Bone came out into the hallway. He had a beer in his hand, his face red from alcohol. He looked me up and down with contempt and smiled mockingly, showing teeth stained with tobacco. "Who is it, sis?" "Ah, the old rancher." He stepped forward, standing imposingly right behind Heather, blowing the stench of alcohol in my face. "Hey, old man, you got the wrong house. Nobody's buying vegetables here. Get lost." I clenched my fist. Rage ignited in my chest like fire. "I came to see my son. Move." "Your son doesn't want to see you. He's sick of your smell of cow shit." T-Bone laughed, then turned to yell at Heather. "What are you doing? Close the door. Kick him out or I won't be responsible." Heather trembled. I clearly saw on her wrist, where the sweater sleeve had ridden up, some bruises, finger marks. Someone had squeezed hard. "Dad, please, go," Heather said, her eyes filling with tears. She looked at me pleadingly. "Please, Matthew's fine. Tomorrow I'll tell him to call you. Please, just go." "Heather, where's my son?" I tried to push the door open to enter, but bam! The door slammed violently in my face. The sound of the bolt sliding home echoed in the cold night air. I stood there alone in the freezing darkness. Inside, T-Bone's laughter rang out again, accompanied by the gangster rap at full volume, as if to drown out any further protest and mock the helplessness of an old man. Do they think a wooden door is going to stop me? Do they think I'm going back to the terminal crying? They were very wrong. I took a few steps back, looking up at the second-floor window. Daniel and Heather's bedroom, all dark, no signs of life. I bent down, pretending to pick up my duffel bag, and walked toward the gate as if I'd given up. I walked until I was lost behind the oak trees, waiting until I was sure no one was looking out the windows. Then I threw my heavy bag into the bushes. I kept only the knife in my pocket. I pulled up my hood to cover my head, and sticking to the shadows along the stone wall, made my way around to the back of the house. If they won't open for me the easy way, I'll enter the hard way, and I'm not ringing the bell again. The back garden of Daniel's house used to be the most peaceful place in the world. Every time I visited, we'd prune the rose bushes together, take care of the green grass. Daniel loved this garden. He said it was the only place where he could breathe in the noisy city. But tonight, that garden looked like a desolate battlefield. I jumped over the low wooden fence in the corner. My knees ached from arthritis, but I held on without making noise. The waning moon faintly illuminated the scene before me, and my soul was crushed. Daniel's precious rose bushes had been trampled without mercy. The green grass was now full of deep tire tracks, the earth plowed up, everything turned into a mud pit. Clearly those trucks had driven all the way back here, not to see the landscape, but to load something very heavy. I held my breath, moving softly like an old cat among the bushes. The night wind blew stronger here, bringing a smell of dampness, gasoline, and something else. Something rotten. I stuck to the wall of the house, advancing toward the old storage shed in the corner of the garden. That shed Daniel had built just to store the lawnmower and various tools, made of cheap pine wood, simple and a bit crooked. Daniel used to joke, "This shack will fall apart with one good kick, Dad." But as I got closer, I noticed a strange change. The shed's rotten wooden door was now reinforced with 2 iron bars across it. On the rusty latch, there now hung a new padlock, big as my fist, shining under the moonlight. Why lock a small room that holds shovels and rakes with such an expensive padlock? My gut screamed louder than ever. My trembling hands touched the cold wood. I put my ear to the crack between the pine boards. Total silence inside. Could I be wrong? I asked myself, sweating despite the cold. Could they be hiding contraband in here? I was about to pull back to find another way into the main house, but just then, something sounded. Clink, clink, metal striking metal, the sound of chains. It came from inside, heavy, tired. I froze. Then a moan followed, not from a wounded animal. It was the moan of a person, suppressed, weak, broken, as if it came from the chest of someone dying without strength. "Ah, water, please." The whisper was so quiet that if I didn't have my ear pressed to the wood, I would have thought it was the wind. But I recognized that voice. Though it was hoarse, distorted by pain, I recognized it. It was the voice that had called me Dad for 35 years. "Daniel?" I whispered, my voice breaking, lips pressed to the wood. "Daniel, is that you, son?" The moan inside stopped. The silence lasted 3 seconds, but for me, it was a century. Then a sound responded, a soft knock on the wood from inside. Knock, knock. And then a sob. The cry of a lost child finding his father, the cry of despair finding hope. "Dad? Daddy!" The world came crashing down on me. My son hadn't gone to Miami. He wasn't sleeping in a warm bed. He was here, in this filthy, freezing shed just yards from his own house, where the invaders ate and drank at their leisure. Tears welled up in my old eyes, then dried instantly, leaving room for something more terrifying. Fury. I stepped back, looking at the huge padlock that imprisoned my son. I touched my pocket, gripping the oak handle of my knife. Tonight, there will be no silent night. Tonight, the devil is going to face a father. I stood trembling in front of the shed door, not from the cold that chilled my bones, but from the broken sound coming from inside. My son's voice, the cry for help of a trapped animal. I had to get in. Now. But that shiny padlock stared at me mockingly like a devil's eye. I touched the knife in my pocket. No. This was for cutting rope or self-defense. It couldn't open a reinforced steel padlock. I looked around in the gloom cast by the moon. In this corner of the garden, Daniel always left tools scattered about. There it was. Under the thick bougainvillea, I saw a rusty iron bar, maybe part of an old broken clothesline. It measured about 2 feet with a flat tip. I grabbed it, feeling the cold metal in my calloused hand. I went back to the door. I didn't try to break the padlock. It was too hard. Instead, I aimed at the wooden frame around the latch. Daniel had built this shed with cheap lumber, and after several harsh Texas winters and rainy seasons, the wood was already half rotten. I wedged the tip of the bar between the metal latch and the wooden doorframe. I took a deep breath, concentrating all the strength of a man who'd carried lumber and wrestled cattle for 40 years into my right arm. "Open up, or I'll tear you to pieces," I hissed through clenched teeth. Crack! The wood snapped dryly. The latch popped off, taking a chunk of rotten wood with it. The door swung open slightly, groaning on rusted hinges. I held my breath. Had the noise alerted those in the house? I glanced toward the main house. The gangster rap kept booming. The laughter continued. Maybe God was using those filthy sounds to cover me. I slipped inside the shed and closed the door behind me. The darkness inside was thick, suffocating, but what hit me first wasn't the darkness. It was the smell. A horrible mixture that turned my stomach, smell of rotten wood, strong stench of old urine, and hidden somewhere beneath it all the metallic smell of dried blood and cheap antiseptic. Trembling, I took out my phone. I turned on the flashlight. The cold white light swept across the small, messy room, torn fertilizer bags, old lawnmower parts lying around. And then the light stopped in the corner, at the main support post of the shed. My heart stopped. Daniel, my tall, strong son, the pride of our family name, was lying there, curled up on the cold, dirty floor. He wore only torn shorts, his skin purple from the cold. His hands were tied behind his back to the post with rough rope. But the worst was his right leg. A thick iron chain, the kind used for vicious dogs, squeezed his right ankle. The other end was hooked to an eye bolt nailed deep into the concrete floor. The ankle was swollen to double its normal size, black and purple. The shin was twisted at a grotesque, unnatural angle. They'd broken his leg. And they'd left him like that, without a splint, without a bandage, only dried blood crusted on his skin. "Daniel," my voice broke. That curled-up figure jumped. He lifted his head, squinting at the light. His face was gaunt, beard grown out. One eye was swollen shut. His lips were cracked and white. When he recognized me, his good eye opened wide, not with joy, but with terror. "Dad?" he whispered with a raspy voice like wind through a broken chimney. "Turn it off. Turn off the light, Dad. Run. You have to run." I didn't listen. I threw myself to his side, falling on my knees on the cold earth. I cradled his face full of bruises, my hot tears falling on his cheeks. "My God, my son, what did they do to you? Who did this?" Daniel trembled in my arms, not from cold, but from fear. He tried to push me away with his little remaining strength. "You can't be here. T-Bone has a gun. He's going to kill you. Please, Dad, go." "I'm not going anywhere," I said firmly, taking off my thick jacket to cover him. "I'm here. Nobody's going to kill anyone. I'm getting you out of this hell." I touched his broken leg as gently as I could. Daniel let out a moan of pain, shrinking back. Rage exploded in me, burning away all fear. I looked at the chain, then at my son's destroyed face. This wasn't domestic violence. This was torture. This was the work of demons. "Dad, forgive me," Daniel cried, tears mixing with the dirt on his face. He rested his head on my shoulder, weak as a little child. "I promised to cook you brisket, and look at me, lying here like a dog." "Don't talk anymore, son." I stroked his head, feeling the bumps on his skull, evidence of blows. "Tell me why. Why did your wife's family do this? Where's Heather? Does she know?" At the mention of Heather, Daniel went rigid. A different pain, deeper than the physical, appeared in his eyes. "Heather," he whispered bitterly. "She knows, Dad. She stood there watching. She saw how they beat me." I froze. Heather, the daughter-in-law who'd always called me Dad, the girl I thought was good. Daniel breathed with difficulty and began to recount every word like a stab in my heart. "Last week I went down to the warehouse to check the trucks. You know my company. Lately there were these night trips that seemed strange. I saw T-Bone lurking around. He doesn't work for me, Dad." He swallowed hard. His throat was painfully dry. Quickly, I opened my water bottle and gave him a drink. I snuck into the back warehouse without them seeing me, Daniel continued. I saw my father-in-law, Frank, and T-Bone taking the spare tires off the trucks. Inside the tires, Dad, it was full of white packages, crystal meth, pounds and pounds of it. Holy God, I whispered, crossing myself. I yelled at them, told them I was calling the police, started to pull out my phone. Daniel's voice broke. But I didn't expect Frank, my own father-in-law, to hit me from behind with a wrench. I passed out. I gritted my teeth, closing my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. A father-in-law beating his son-in-law to protect drugs. This world had gone mad. When I woke up, I was already here, tied up. T-Bone was standing in front of me with a baseball bat. Daniel looked at his mangled leg, shuddering. He was laughing, Dad. He told me, "You like calling the cops? I'm going to teach you to walk carefully." And then he shattered my leg with that bat. I passed out from the pain, woke up screaming, passed out again. Those sons of... I cursed through tears of rage. They took my phone, forced me to unlock it. T-Bone said if I didn't give the password, he'd kill Heather. He threatened to come after you. Daniel looked at me with his swollen eyes. I was so scared, Dad. Scared they'd do something to you. That's why I gave them the code. And Heather? I had to know. What did she do? Daniel's face crumpled. She cried. She begged her dad, but he slapped her, told her, you want to live well or you want the whole family to go to jail. And just like that, she went silent. She chose her family. Dad, she left me lying here to die. I felt ice run down my spine. Betrayal, that poison that kills faster than bullets. They hadn't just broken my son's leg. They'd broken his trust, his heart. What do they want from you? Why don't they just kill you and be done with it? Daniel looked at me with darkness in his eyes. If they kill me, the police investigate. The company's in my name. They need the company to launder money, to move cargo. They need me alive. But alive like a zombie, Dad. He pointed to the dark corner of the shed where there was a small wooden table. Look, Dad, look what they're planning to do to me tonight. I shined the light over there. What I saw froze my blood solid. On the rotten table, next to an empty whiskey bottle, sat a shiny metal tray. Inside was a small plastic bag with white powder, a metal spoon burned black underneath, a lighter, and a new medical syringe still in its packaging, a drug injection kit. I stared at those instruments, dizzy. I'd worked the border for 25 years. I knew what these things meant. They're going to inject me, Dad, Daniel said desperately. T-Bone said since it's Christmas Eve, he's going to give me a little gift. He wants to make me an addict, wants to turn me into an animal that begs for drugs at his feet. Daniel's tears came again. Dad, if I become an addict, my word before the law is worth zero. The police will see me as some paranoid junkie accusing his decent in-laws. They're going to control me with the drugs. I'm going to lose everything. The company, my honor, my life. I looked at my son, an engineer, a healthy, intelligent man, on the verge of being turned into a slave to that poison. The plan wasn't just cruel. It was perfect in a terrifying way. Killing someone requires hiding a body, but destroying someone's soul? That lets them keep using the body to make money. No, I said, my voice low and cold as ice. I stood up, turning to my son. There will be no injection. Nobody's going to turn you into an addict. You don't understand, Dad. T-Bone's coming. He said he'd finish his bottle and come and take care of me. You have to go now. Click. A noise at the shed door cut Daniel off. We both jumped. The latch outside rattled. Heavy steps on dry grass, drunken humming. Merry Christmas to my dear brother-in-law. It was T-Bone's voice, slurred, menacing. He was coming. I looked at Daniel's chain. No time to break it. I looked for a weapon, the rusty bar, and the knife in my pocket. Dad, hide, Daniel whispered in panic. Behind those sacks, quick. I looked at my son, then at the vibrating door. I knew I couldn't hide. If I hid, he'd inject Daniel right in front of my eyes. No. Damn way I was going to allow that. I turned off the flashlight, put it away. I stepped back, pressing myself into the darkness just behind the door, right hand gripping the iron bar, left hand on the knife. My heart beat so hard I feared he'd hear it. I'm a 72-year-old man with arthritis and tired eyes. He's a bull of 30, brutal, drunk, and armed. An unfair fight, but I had two things he didn't: surprise and the instinct of an old wolf cornered defending his cub. The door burst open. Moonlight poured in, drawing the shadow of a large man on the floor. The smell of alcohol hit me like a wave. T-Bone stumbled in, bottle half empty in his right hand, black pistol in his left. He didn't turn on a light, maybe out of confidence, maybe because he liked to enjoy his victim's fear in the dark. "Let's see, brother-in-law," he slurred mockingly. "I brought your medicine, ready to fly to heaven?" He advanced toward Daniel. My son shrank back, staring at the gun. "No, please, Ty. Don't call me Ty. Oh, call me boss." He laughed, raising the bottle for one more drink. At that moment, when he threw his head back, exposing his throat, dropping his guard, I came out of the shadow behind the door. I didn't scream. Smart old men don't scream when they attack. I put all my weight and all my hatred into the rusty iron bar. Whack! The bar struck his armed wrist with a sickening crack. His scream of pain pierced the night. The gun flew from his hand, skittering across the concrete into darkness. "What the hell?" He spun around, eyes bulging in surprise. He saw me, an old man with white hair, eyes like fire, bar in hand. I didn't give him time to process it. I swung the second blow at his knee. But T-Bone, despite being drunk, knew how to fight. He stepped back by reflex. The bar only grazed his thigh. He roared, throwing the whiskey bottle at my face. I ducked. The bottle exploded against the post, glass flying. Taking advantage of my movement, he charged at me like a bull. The impact sent me crashing into the fertilizer sacks. My chest felt like it had been hit by a sledgehammer. I dropped the bar. "Old piece of shit, I'm gonna kill you," T-Bone howled, throwing a punch at my face. He connected with my cheekbone. I saw stars, tasted blood in my mouth. He threw himself on top of me, hands going for my throat. Fat, rough fingers squeezed my windpipe. I couldn't breathe. My vision darkened. "Dad, no!" Daniel screamed, pulling uselessly at his chain. I saw T-Bone's face pressed close to mine. He was laughing, a devil's smile. He thought he'd already won, thought youth would crush old age, but he forgot something. I'm a rancher. I'd dealt with bulls and wild horses all my life. I'd been a border cop facing cartel enforcers, and I had an ace up my sleeve. My right hand fumbled in my pocket. My fingers found the oak handle. Click. The tactical knife snapped open. I didn't stab wildly. I remembered how to kill livestock humanely, how to bleed wild boars. I needed a weak point, a vital spot. With my last ounce of strength, I plunged the knife into his inner thigh, right where the femoral artery runs close to the surface. Slash. T-Bone let out a scream of terror that shattered the night. He released my neck, grabbing his leg. Blood started spurting, hot, dark, soaking me. I shoved him off, rolling to the side, coughing, gasping for air. He tried to stand, face going pale, eyes bulging. He was looking for the gun. "The gun! Where's the gun?" he moaned. I saw it too, about 3 feet from Daniel. "Daniel, the gun!" I yelled. Daniel, despite his agony, stretched out his bound hands and grabbed the weapon with his fingertips. He aimed at T-Bone, trembling. "Freeze! Freeze, you bastard!" T-Bone froze. He saw the black barrel pointed at him, then his bleeding wound. The bravado left him, replaced by pure cowardly fear. "No, don't shoot, man. It was just business. Just a joke, brother-in-law." I got up with difficulty, grabbed the iron bar, approached him and delivered a hard blow to the back of his head. Bam! T-Bone's eyes rolled back. He fell like a sack of potatoes, unconscious. I stood there, panting. Everything hurt. I was covered in someone else's blood, but I didn't feel disgust. I felt satisfaction. "It's done," I told Daniel. "Let's get you out of here, son." There was no time to rest. T-Bone's scream had surely alerted those in the house. The gangster rap suddenly stopped. I heard shouts from inside. "What happened, Rick?" Frank's voice boomed. I cursed. I checked T-Bone's pockets. Keys, thank God. A keychain with the Ford logo, keys to one of the trucks. I went back to Daniel. The problem was the chain. I didn't have the key to the padlock. "Dad, how am I going to leave? I'm chained," Daniel said desperately. I looked at the eye bolt in the concrete. It was firm, but the chain attached to it with a U-shaped shackle held by a screw nut. "Pass me that wrench over there," I pointed. Daniel crawled painfully for a rusty wrench among the tools. I started turning the nut. It was stubborn from rust. "Quick, Dad, they're coming," Daniel urged, looking at the door. I gritted my teeth, using all my strength. I skinned my knuckles, bleeding. The nut barely budged. Finally, it started to turn. I kept going. At last it loosened. I removed the shackle. The chain came free from the floor, though it still hung from Daniel's ankle. That'll have to do. We go like this. Let's move. I helped Daniel stand. He moaned when the broken leg touched the ground. Lean on me. Hop. Hold on tight, I ordered. We staggered out of the shed like drunks. Coming into the yard, a powerful light from the back porch blinded us. Freeze right there. Frank Torres stood at the back door with a double-barreled shotgun. Beside him stood Gloria and Heather, her hand over her mouth. Kill him! That old man killed my son, Gloria shrieked. Dad, no! Heather's voice was weak, terrified. Bang! The shotgun blast hit the dirt at my feet, spraying mud. The old man was shooting to kill. He was willing to murder his own son-in-law to keep him quiet. Run! I yelled, pulling Daniel toward the side fence. We rolled through the bushes, clothes tearing. Another shot rang out, breaking branches above us. We reached the front yard. The 3 trucks were still there. I pressed the button on the key fob. The middle one blinked its lights. Get in, fast! I shoved Daniel into the passenger seat, throwing his broken leg in without gentleness because there was no time for gentleness. I jumped behind the wheel, slamming the door. Frank had already come around, aiming the shotgun at the windshield. Get out or I'll blow your heads off, he screamed, red as a fighting bull. I looked him in the eyes through the glass, put the key in the ignition, turned it. The V8 engine roared like a beast. Let's see if your shotgun is faster than my truck, I murmured. I put it in gear, stomped the gas. The truck jumped forward, straight at him. Frank leaped aside in panic, falling to the ground. The shotgun flew from his hands. The truck rammed the iron gate. Crash! The tremendous sound of metal against metal. The gate flew into the street. I swerved left, tires screeching on cold asphalt. We launched ourselves into the darkness, leaving behind that house of hell, the screams and the betrayal. I looked at Daniel. He was panting, pale, sweating cold, clutching his broken leg with the chain still dangling from it. Did we make it, Dad? His voice was barely a whisper. I didn't see pursuit lights behind us. Maybe they were busy with T-bone bleeding out. Not yet, son, I said, eyes glued to the dark road ahead. The war's just beginning. I squeezed my son's cold hand, the calloused hand of the father and the trembling hand of the son. But tonight we won. My live stream video, just a few desperate minutes long, became the spark that ignited a firestorm. Within 24 hours, it had been viewed millions of times across America and Mexico. The image of a 72-year-old father with a knife defending his chained son in a hospital room touched something primal in people's hearts, something that demanded justice. The hashtags #justice. For Daniel and #TheBraveFather trended nationwide. News outlets picked it up, social media exploded, protesters gathered outside Oak Creek Police Station, congressmen made statements, the Attorney General's office couldn't ignore the public outcry. Daniel and I were transferred to the military hospital in Austin for our safety. They operated on his leg, inserted pins, set the bones. The orthopedic surgeon told him straight, "You'll walk again, but you'll limp for the rest of your life." Daniel just smiled, tapping his cast. "No problem, Doc. Better to walk with a limp than crawl on my knees before those bastards." I looked at my son, really looked at him. The weak, broken man in that shed was gone. Before me sat someone who'd walked through hell and come back stronger. 1 week after our rescue, James Harper visited our guarded hospital room with news. "The raid happened this morning," he said, setting his tablet on Daniel's bed. "You'll want to see this." He played the helmet camera footage, dawn light, federal agents storming Daniel's house, the gate I'd destroyed still lying in the yard, officers flooding through doors with rifles raised, Frank Torres and Gloria in the living room, frantically burning papers in the fireplace, T-bone on the sofa, leg bandaged, an AR-15 within arm's reach. He'd been planning to use it, but the real evidence was in the garage. When they jackhammered through the false concrete floor, they found it, a hidden bunker containing more than 50 bricks of heroin, pounds of crystal meth, assault weapons, and nearly $2 million in cash. The luxurious house, the expensive cars, the parties, all of it built on blood and poison. And then the camera showed Heather. She wasn't running, wasn't fighting. She sat alone at the kitchen table, crying silently, mascara running down her face. When they put her in handcuffs, she looked directly at the camera, as if she could see me through it, and her lips formed words. "Dad, forgive me." I felt no triumph watching that, only a deep, aching sadness. She'd been a good girl once, before greed and cowardice devoured her conscience. James also brought other news. Sheriff Hayes and his 3 deputies were arrested for bribery, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. Dr. Carter was under investigation for failure to report. The nurse who'd helped us was being called a hero. "There's going to be a trial," James said. "Federal court, 3 months from now. Are you ready?" Daniel looked at me. I looked at Daniel. "We're ready," we said together. 3 months later, the federal courthouse in Austin was a circus. News vans lined the streets, protesters held signs, "Justice for Daniel," and "Lock them up." Every seat in the courtroom was filled. Journalists, activists, ordinary citizens who'd been moved by our story. The Torres family had hired the most expensive legal team in Texas. Their lead attorney, Gerald Whitmore, was a silver-haired man in a $3,000 suit who smiled like a shark. Daniel sat beside me in his wheelchair, legs still in a brace. He'd been practicing walking with a cane, but the prosecutor asked him to use the wheelchair for the trial. "Let the jury see what they did to you," she'd said. The trial lasted 3 days. Whitmore argued that Daniel was a drug addict who'd staged everything to extort money from his in-laws, that the injuries were self-inflicted, that the drugs in the bunker were planted, that there was no direct evidence linking his clients to any crime. He was smooth, persuasive. For a moment, I worried the jury might actually believe him. Then it was our turn. James Harper took the stand. He held up the SD card, sealed in an evidence bag that had been hidden in Daniel's shoe. "Your Honor, this is the irrefutable proof." The courtroom lights dimmed. A massive screen flickered to life. And there it was, crystal clear footage from Daniel's body camera. The timestamp showed the date. The angle was from Daniel's chest, capturing everything in front of him. You could see Frank Torres and T-Bone in the warehouse, removing spare tires from the trucks, white packages spilling out. Their voices were perfectly audible. "If this shipment goes smooth, we're looking at $2 million. Easy," T-Bone said. "Just do it right," Frank replied. "If Daniel finds out..." Then Daniel's voice, off camera. "What the hell are you doing? I'm calling the police." Frank turned, face full of rage and panic. "Daniel, wait! We can explain..." The camera spun violently as Frank swung something from behind. A sickening crack. The image went black, but the audio kept recording. Thump, 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 Daniel's screams. "Stop, please!" T-Bone's laughter. "You like calling cops? Let me teach you to walk carefully." Crack, the sound of bones snapping, Daniel's howl of agony, then silence. When the video ended, the courtroom was absolutely still. You could hear people breathing. I looked at the jury. 3 women were crying. One man had his fist pressed to his mouth, face pale. Frank Torres had sunk into his chair, ashen. T-Bone stared at the table, trembling. Even Whitmore had nothing to say. The judge struck his gavel, a sound like a nail being driven into a coffin. "I'll hear from the victim's father, Michael Miller. Please take the stand." I stood, smoothing my shirt. I'd worn my best clothes, the same ones I'd worn to Patricia's funeral. I walked to the witness box and placed my hand on the Bible. When I sat down, I looked directly at the Torres family. "Your Honor," I began, my voice steady. "I don't know much about laws. I'm just a father. I taught my son to be honest, to work hard, to stand up for what's right. I didn't teach him how to deal with demons." I pointed at Daniel in his wheelchair. "They broke his leg, but they didn't break his soul. They tried to destroy him with drugs, with torture, with betrayal, but they failed." I pointed at the Torres family. "You have money, you have power, you have expensive lawyers, but we have something stronger. We have the truth, and the truth never dies. It might get buried for a while, but it always claws its way back to the light." I turned to the jury. "My son isn't asking for revenge. He's asking for justice. And justice isn't just for him. It's for every person who's ever been victimized by people who think money and violence make them untouchable." The courtroom erupted in applause. The judge had to bang his gavel 5 times to restore order. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all charges. The sentences came down hard. Frank Torres, 25 years federal prison. T-Bone Torres, 30 years for torture and conspiracy to commit murder. Gloria Torres, 15 years as an accomplice. Heather Miller, 8 years, reduced for cooperation with investigators. All assets seized. Justice was served. After the sentencing, before Heather was transported to the women's federal prison, she requested to see Daniel one last time. The marshals gave them 5 minutes in a guarded waiting room. I stood by the door, ready to leave if Daniel wanted privacy. But he shook his head. "Stay, Dad. I want you to hear this." Heather sat across from him, hands cuffed in front of her. Her expensive makeup was gone. Her designer clothes replaced by a prison jumpsuit. She looked small. Broken. "Daniel," she began, voice trembling. "I'm so sorry. I was scared. Scared they'd kill me. Scared they'd kill you. I thought if I just went along, if I stayed quiet, maybe we'd all survive." "I know you were scared," Daniel interrupted, his voice soft but firm. "I don't blame you for being afraid. Everyone fears death." Heather looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "So you forgive me? When I get out, maybe we can—" "Heather." Daniel held up his hand. "I forgive you, I really do. Holding a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I'm letting go of my anger so I can live in peace." He paused, and his voice became steel. "But forgiving is not the same as returning. You stood there and watched while T-Bone shattered my leg with a baseball bat. You stayed silent when your father hit me with a wrench. You chose them over me. That silence hurt worse than any beating." Daniel gripped the arms of his wheelchair. "I need a partner who stands with me in the storm, not someone who hides behind my enemies. I hope you find peace in prison, Heather. I hope you become a better person, but you won't find that peace with me." He turned his wheelchair toward the door. "Goodbye, Heather." Behind us, Heather collapsed, sobbing. The kind of desperate tears that come too late. The guards led her away. Outside the courthouse, spring sunlight bathed us in gold. A warm breeze carried the scent of bluebonnets. "You did the right thing," I told Daniel as we waited for James to bring the van around. "It hurts, Dad," Daniel admitted, touching his chest. "Right here. It hurts." "I know, son, but that wound will heal too. And when it does, you'll be stronger than you ever imagined." 3 months later. Late March, my ranch in Texas. Winter was long gone, but up in the hill country the nights still carried a chill. In my yard, a massive bonfire roared under the darkening sky. Red sparks flew upward like fireflies. The smell of mesquite smoke and roasting brisket filled the air, the smell of home, of family, of promises kept. Daniel stood by the fire, leaning on his cane, using his free hand to turn the ribs on the grill. He'd kept his promise after all, a belated Christmas barbecue, but the best damn meal I'd ever eaten. "It's ready, old man," he called, his face red from the heat and joy. "Get the whiskey." The smile was back. My son had returned. I brought out the aged bourbon, the bottle I'd been saving, poured 3 glasses. James Harper had driven up from Austin to join us. He'd become like a second son to me through all this. 3 men sat around the fire under a sky full of stars. We raised our glasses. "To survival," James said. "To justice," Daniel added. "To family," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "To being alive." "Cheers." The bourbon burned going down, a good burn, warming the soul. I watched Daniel eat with gusto, laughing at one of James's stories. I looked at his leg brace, thought about the cast that had finally come off last week. I thought about that terrible night in December. The desperation when I found him chained in that shed. The loneliness of fighting a corrupt system. The terror of those moments when I thought we might not survive. If I hadn't trusted my gut. If I'd let fear stop me. If I'd chosen the safety of my ranch over the danger of rescuing my son. Right now I'd be sitting alone with Daniel's photograph, eating my heart out with guilt until I died. I turned toward the fire, as if speaking to all the fathers out there who might hear this story. Listen to me. Life is full of traps, wolves dressed as sheep. They can take your money, your house, your pride. But there's one thing they can never take, the blood that runs through your family. Daniel and James had stopped talking. They were listening. "Never ignore the voice of your heart," I continued. "When your instincts tell you your children are in danger, send fear to hell. Kick down doors, fight like a beast, do whatever it takes to protect them." I raised my glass one more time. Because a man's greatest wealth isn't what he has in the bank. It's the people sitting around his fire tonight. I'm Michael Miller. I'm a father, and I'm damn proud to be one. We drank in silence, the firelight dancing on our faces. Daniel reached over and squeezed my shoulder. "Love you, Dad." "Love you too, son." The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks into the vast Texas sky. Somewhere out there, the world kept turning, full of darkness and danger and evil men who thought they were untouchable. But tonight, in this small circle of light, we had everything that mattered. We had each other, and that was enough. The wind picked up, carrying the smoke toward the stars. In the distance, a coyote howled. I pulled my jacket tighter and smiled. Winter had passed, spring was here, and my son was home.